Let me. Oh my God. Did it go? Computer froze. Whenever, like lately, my computer just been frozen. I think we're on. Are we on? No, it's still processing. I'm so sorry. Normally it takes a lot faster, but
I see a
today
live.
I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's
Okay.
you were seeing live on your end. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I do not know if we're live. Wait, let me just refresh. Oh, we're live. We're live. Okay, perfect. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome to Venture. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome to Venture Grace. I'm so sorry. I'm like, I just want to make sure it's like actually live, and I'm like having a major heart attack right now. But anyway, we're live. In the
No
past like
worries.
45 seconds. Okay, great. Okay, so I think you have a really interesting career, and you were at Google for over 19 years, and then before that, you have been a software engineer or system engineer for various different companies. I want to start with like, what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you kind of took to later on running tech organizations?
Um, I think early on,
Mhm,
I think early on, I realized that you really have to drive your career, you know?
mhm,
I think right out of school, I thought, oh, your manager is going to guide you. And, sometimes that happens,
mhm,
but sometimes they want to point you in a direction that maybe you're not interested in. And
mhm,
so I think you have to stay very focused on what it is
mhm,
you want and not let other people make those decisions for
mhm,
you.
mhm,
People will steer you, and it's
mhm,
all very helpful. And I've had great leaders and mentors over the years.
mhm,
But very early on, I realized that sometimes people would steer you in something that wasn't going to work for me.
mhm,
And so I had to find my voice and really understand what motivated me, right? Because there's
mhm,
a lot of things you can do, but you really need to make choices on things that'll keep you motivated. Because our careers are 40 years.
mhm,
Even when you're super lucky,
mhm,
it's probably going to be 40 years. You can count your school years if you want to cut
mhm,
that down. Like count it
mhm.
how you want. But our careers are long, and you want to be motivated to stick with it.
Yeah, totally. Were you always loving engineering or like I guess like for your current job since you're the CTO of GitLab and I guess like what are something that you feel like are different from I mean obviously it's very different from like running code day to day, but I guess like what does a day in your life look like as a CTO of GitLab?
A day in the life of a CTO at GitLab. There's a lot. I think the great thing, and I don't know that I understood this before I got the title,
Mhm,
but I'm now accountable. Look, one, I do love engineering, but I'm
mhm,
actually in engineering because I'm a problem solver. And I
mhm,
think this field, you know, has a wealth of
mhm, mhm,
problems to solve. But the day in the life for me is I have to stay very focused on the business strategy, the
mhm,
whole company. What are we doing?
mhm,
And while I lead the engineering division, which is all of development,
mhm,
operations, and customer support,
mhm,
as CTO, you're actually responsible for the overall business strategy. So I need to understand what's happening and go to market and like, what
mhm,
are they hearing? What do they need? I need to understand everything
mhm,
happening in legal, right?
mhm,
In finance, in product, as well
mhm,
as engineering. So, like, I love the fact that I have to have the big picture top of
mhm,
mind every single day.
mhm,
And then for my day job, like I'm looking at like what is the customer experience overall, not just
mhm,
in the day, but like what am I hearing? What is our survey feedback? What are I meet with customers and talk to them about what's going on for them. I have to, obviously development execution, right?
mhm,
What are the big things we're doing? Are we on track for our milestones? And then, production health, because I have all of operations. So what's happening there? And then, of course, my people, right?
Mhm.
Not my people, but like the org overall, how's the health? What's the mood? How are people feeling? Because, there can be a lot of pressure. And
Mhm.
as a leader, it's super important for you to understand
Mhm.
how is the pressure today, right?
Mhm.
And what can you do to mitigate that or reassure people or just check in on them?
Mhm.
And then, of course, there's the cross org health, right?
Mhm.
Like, how are our relationships with all the other divisions here at GitLab? So I love it. It's a
Mhm.
lot. It's a lot.
Mhm.
I didn't realize how much it was going to be, honestly,
Mhm.
because I had run a much bigger org before
Mhm.
than I have here.
Mhm.
But I had like business strategy and stuff like that, but I wasn't the one responsible. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it can be really intense, but incredibly rewarding on those really, really good days, Grace.
For sure. I thought like it was so interesting. Like, okay, maybe we could start with like from a product level, like what is GitLab, and then we could talk about like the business model since you mentioned about like, you were taking care of a lot of like these like business strategies and running software engineering, operation, customer support teams. And why don't we start with like what is GitLab and then we talk about the business model.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry.
So
It's like
GitLab is a DevSecOps platform.
mhm,
And I like to say, like, we're software engineers who build software to help
mhm,
software engineers build
mhm,
software.
mhm,
And GitLab is the most comprehensive software development lifecycle platform.
mhm,
And that's one of the reasons I decided to come here, because the power of a platform to really help teams be more efficient, right?
mhm,
In how they work and to get their job done and to have an impact on their business
mhm,
was very compelling to
mhm,
me. And so we start very early on in the software development cycle. So, like, planning, right? How do you do your planning? How do you break down the things you want to build? We break it down, we put it into epics and issues, and that way all the different teams can collaborate together on what they're going
mhm,
to build. And then, of course, we do source code management. So as you are building your code, right,
mhm,
you're saving it, you're code reviewing with your peers and your teams,
mhm,
and then you move into like testing your code, documenting your code, checking for security vulnerabilities. We do all these scannings. We have, our runners go out and can do all the
mhm,
automation that software engineers need to be done, validate that the code is
mhm,
there, all the integration tests, all your smoke tests. And then of course you can push it into production, and then we can monitor it and give you analytics about how all of that is going. So yeah,
mm,
it's a really powerful platform.
for sure. I wonder, so like how, I guess like for a person who I think a lot of people use GitLab obviously, but like I guess like how does a business side of things works? I guess like who would you say are your target like ICP and like how do you think about from like a business perspective as a CTO
You mean the business perspective
of how I guess
of
how it works
GitLab's
at GitLab?
business,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
how we serve our customers' business?
Both. Like maybe we could start with like GitLab's business model.
Yeah. So, um, one, we're an open core platform, which I
Mhm,
also liked a lot, and I can talk about what that means. Um, but we're working with customers who have to deliver their software safely. We
mhm,
try to learn like what problems are they dealing with now, what are the drivers for their business, what
mhm,
are they concerned about delivering software,
mhm,
and think about like where their developers are, how automated is their system today,
mhm,
where their needs are, and we work closely with them. We sell GitLab, obviously,
mhm,
to the customers, and it's tiered, right, based on the needs of the
mhm,
customers. I think a big topic today is cybersecurity,
mhm,
right? And I think early on in GitLab, really people were just looking for source code management and then maybe
Mhm.
the deployments. But then over time, there's lots of different personas that are
Mhm.
involved with
Mhm.
building software. And that's when we
Mhm.
started to shift left, like more into the design phase. But today, it's really about the security scanning and catching security problems
Mhm.
early on. And so depending where companies are and what their big focus is, are they just trying to keep track, source code
Mhm.
management, or are they trying to do the full life cycle? And then, we sell to them. We actually have 3 different platforms that we offer.
Mhm.
So we have a SaaS offering, but you don't have to, not all companies want to move their software development into the cloud.
Mhm.
And so we offer GitLab for them to self-manage if they
Mhm.
choose to do that. And then we have a fully managed service where
Mhm.
they are on an isolated instance and we manage it for them. We manage their GitLab for them. And so we do
Mm.
all 3 platforms.
Totally. I wonder since like, you're running engineering, operation, and customer support, like how do you structure your day? So like for example, on the day-to-day engineering, so obviously a lot of people producing code and then on the operational side, like, what does it kind of like look like for you? As well as like obviously customer support is like also a really big part to like make sure the clients are adding on to things that they want to add or like knowing how to use and everything. But I guess like from a day-to-day perspective as a CTO, how do you kind of like manage these three big bracket of work?
Well, I'm super lucky that I have an amazing leadership team, and I
Mhm.
do think that that's super important,
Mhm.
right? Look, I need to know what's going on, but
Mhm.
I'm only one person, and so in my first year here, I
Mhm.
really spent time, working with the leaders to
Mhm.
make sure I understood what their needs were, they understood what my needs are, and because we need to communicate a lot. I would
Mhm.
say I am on Slack all day.
Mhm.
I didn't use Slack when I was at Google.
Mhm.
And when I first started using Slack, I was like, wow, this is like a major DOS attack, right? Because
Mhm.
I am in so many channels. Um, I've figured it out. I've got my priority channels in there. Um, and so it's really working with the leadership team, my VPs, my directors, and the managers as needed,
Mhm.
right? But it's important that, we understand how to all work together. I never want to undermine my leaders. I'm just there to support them. Um,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, it'll depend. Like some days I'm like spending more time in the AI team, sometimes more time with the infrastructure team, right? Like
Mhm.
how are we scaling? Managing 3
Mhm.
platforms is challenging. And
Mhm.
there's a reason a lot of companies are deciding that like everything just needs to move into the cloud. And it's
Mhm.
because it can be very complex. I
Mhm.
actually was pretty impressed when I came to GitLab to sort of see how we actually managed the code base. We have a single code base. These are not 3
Mhm.
different code bases. That's very powerful. It actually also requires the teams to be incredibly responsible for
Mhm.
how things are working together. And then we're
Mhm.
also open core, right? So the community can contribute back to us. And we have to treat those, in the same way that, the same code reviews, the same diligence, the same
Mhm.
testing, and all of that. Um, and that takes a lot of time from
Mhm.
the teams and diligence, and I feel so fortunate to work with so many people that have such a deep sense of responsibility um,
Mhm.
to making sure that this is scalable and that it works well and that we're
Mhm.
being really responsible because the impact affects the customers. I also think open core helps us a lot, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people looking at our code, commenting on our issues. GitLab is incredibly transparent. So if we have an
Mhm.
issue open, like the community can see it, they can comment on it, they can tell us whether or not
Mhm.
they think we're triaging something appropriately, but that makes us better.
Mhm.
I strongly believe that, we were very transparent within Google, but
Mhm.
not external. And I think it's been a transition for me to come here and
Mhm.
be so transparent.
Mhm.
But I love it because it forces you to be better.
For sure. I wonder, so like, you have been at Google for over 19 years, and why don't we talk about like, I guess like how do you if let's say you have like three we separated the 19 years into like three segment, let's call it like 6 to 7 years each, and then like what would you say were the core learning journeys like look like for you? Maybe like let's say the first 6 years you just entered as an engineer, and then in the middle you transitioned to leadership, and in the end you're like the full-on VP of engineering of the core infrastructure. I guess like what does it mean for you while you were working on
Well,
from different things there?
I I was a manager before I joined Google, and I
Hmm.
actually joined Google to not to get out of management,
Hmm.
actually. I always, and even I think when I was a manager, it was very important to me to be a very technical manager, to always have my own projects. And I did at Google for a very, very long time. I think that was great about Google,
Hmm.
that, you know, they wanted you to be technically engaged.
Hmm.
I think it makes you a better leader to do that. So I think early on was about, and you have to remember the company was so much smaller.
Hmm.
Right? Like when I joined, we would have, the developers had test machines. We had test machines under our desks, right?
Hmm.
And you would realize that maybe something in production was actually running from someone's desk. Like that's actually how small we were when I first
Hmm.
started. Um, we fixed that very quickly, just to be
Hmm.
clear. And then, I was mostly focused because at that time when I joined, it wasn't what it is today, right? Like Android was a recent acquisition when I
Hmm.
started. Chrome was an idea. Gmail
Hmm.
was not what we used internally. So
Hmm.
it was very early on. And I think everybody was in it, right? We
Hmm.
wanted to be a different kind of company, and everybody was trying to figure out like what does that mean, and we were very empowered and we had a lot of autonomy. So being an engineer at Google was amazing.
Hmm.
I feel really lucky to have been there at that time. And then later on, what I realized was I was actually a good leader. And I thought that, Googlers, that's how we
Hmm.
refer to ourselves.
Hmm.
Googlers deserved good leadership, and I knew that I was really good at getting my work done, and
Hmm.
I knew that I was good to help other people get their work done. And I think
Hmm.
as we were growing, because I wasn't a manager for probably 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
While I was there, I can't remember now. Um, and so I went into management because I thought I could increase my impact,
Hmm.
and do a good job leading a very empowered, autonomous
Hmm.
developers to challenge maybe even what they thought they could do. And then so line manager for a while. I think a big breakthrough probably I had been there, but a year 5 or 6, I moved to Gmail. Um,
Hmm.
and during like just this crazy growth period, and we were driving so much changes, and I learned how to you know I think what we would say, like, you're changing the engines when the airplane's in
Hmm.
the air, because millions of people were on the platform. And
Hmm.
at the time, I was in SRE,
Hmm.
but I worked very closely with the developers. Gmail was probably my favorite experience because of how collaboratively we took on really, really hard problems,
Hmm.
and we work so well together, both developers and SREs, and we had to foster
Hmm.
that trust relationship, and I was a big part of that. Um, and I think it sustained for a long time. And I also think because we pushed the boundaries, I think a lot of the work we did there influenced a lot of the products at
Hmm.
Google. And I think that's why over time my portfolio expanded to, I got to work with all the product areas. And I feel grateful. Like every single one of them um, had something that they taught me pretty
Hmm.
fundamental. Um, that I lean on today and I think about
Mhm.
today. And when people ask me, like, how do I scale our systems? I have so many examples of like, how do you change the back end,
Mhm.
without taking downtime, right? Like, how do you
Mhm.
responsibly migrate user data?
Mhm.
These are things that, were really, really fundamentally important, that we
Mhm.
all felt great responsibility to our users. Um, and I keep that to this day, and then I
Mhm.
think moving into it was Grace, I have to tell you, people remind me all the time that, as I was growing as a leader, people were like, oh, do you want to be a director at Google? And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'll never be a director at Google. I just never thought that was
Mhm.
possible. The leadership at Google was so amazing that I didn't self-identify in that group. And then I became a director. Um, and I did not say I won't be a VP, but I felt like I wasn't going to be a VP. And
Mhm.
then you move into the VP. And I think each of those different executive levels, you take on this new level of responsibility that's more
Mhm.
than just your org, right?
Mhm.
Like when you're a director, you have to be making decisions that affect the business. And then when you become a VP, you have to realize that your decisions affect the company,
Mhm.
right? And so it's this larger sense of responsibility, and you need to be very focused to make sure that every day you're
Mhm.
thinking about the company. And I think it's important to understand you don't not think about the people. You don't, like when you're a team manager, you're thinking about your team and the work your team is doing. And then you have multiple teams and you're thinking
Mhm.
about the people, the work that they're doing, and then the bigger picture, that bigger umbrella.
Mhm.
And then director, you kind of think about the business, and then VP, you think about the company. Um,
Mhm.
but you still have to think about all the other things too.
For sure. I think at one point, like you were managing a 3,500 people team at Google. And how do you think about like, I guess like how do you separate these like different departments? And then I guess like what would you say are like some management lessons that you've learned throughout managing thousands of people?
I don't think I ever got to 3,500. That would, uh, I don't know. I did not get to 3,500. I think it was 2,000. My org
Mm,
was about 2,000 at the largest.
mhm,
Um, I think that when I had 2,000 people, that was actually all of Google's consumer products.
mhm,
I think it was more than 90% of Google's revenue came out of
mhm,
these teams.
mhm,
I think there's a couple of things. Some people think the bigger your org,
mhm,
the better, and I actually think the opposite. I think you can do so much more with leaner teams,
mhm,
just because so much coordination between people, it can be really, really challenging,
mhm,
and it takes a lot of overhead, and it takes away from your ability to do
mhm,
technical work. So I think the important thing is to make sure your teams are as small as they can be without overworking
mhm,
people. I
mhm,
I kind of had a strict rule, or a guideline, not strict. I tried to make it strict, but
mhm,
you got to be flexible. Is I looked at how people spent their time, and I
mhm,
would want 50% of their time to really be spent on the long term, right? And then 30% would be, midterm. And then I wanted 20% to be short term decisions, right?
mhm,
Those are things that like you're reacting to, and they come up, you get
mhm,
escalations, or something you didn't expect happens. And in order to kind of keep those ratios, you have to really start to map out your work. And
mhm,
so I was a big advocate for roadmaps. I like
mhm,
teams to have roadmaps, and then I like groups of teams to have roadmaps, and then larger roadmaps. And as a leader, you can be very prescriptive, but my
mhm,
style is much more so, set the guardrails for people and
mhm,
give them the information that they need.
mhm,
But as an engineer, I wanted to make decisions about what, why, how I was working. And so I try to do that for my team too. And I think
mhm,
that that's, as a leader, super important, because
Mhm.
there's some really smart people, and I can make I can make the decisions for my org, but if I'm the only one making it, then if something happens to me, it fails the organization.
Mm.
So I am constantly thinking about, like, how do I scale? How do I increase the impact? And then how do I make sure
Mhm.
that what the org that I'm building is sustainable without me, which is important for leaders to think about.
Mm, I think that's really interesting. I like what you said about like having the work sustain without you, and then I guess like just like self or like automate the entire process. And speaking of that, I would love for you to chat about, what are some like AI trends that excites you, and then what are some AI tool that you're building either internally or just like leveraging outside of, the company. I guess like how do you think about what are the AI tool that will help you as a CTO to function
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Um, so what am I excited about? Look, I think AI is evolving so quickly.
Mhm,
It's amazing to me. I mean, I'm pretty fortunate because, AI or ML
mhm,
was, common in Google,
mhm,
right? Like, we used it before, and I think people didn't believe it would be as accepted, you
mhm,
know, by consumers or by, everybody in the way that it has been. So I think that's been really, really surprising, and I love to see what people are doing and using it for. The models are just getting, really amazing, and they're always surprising.
mhm,
And I used to enjoy at Google when, you'd ask it to summarize something, and I love to find all the mistakes,
mhm,
right? Like, I thought, oh, look, this is it's putting things together incorrectly, but in
mhm,
really funny ways.
mhm,
And so but what I'm really excited about today, obviously the developer tools, we have all the tools to help people write code, generate code, chat,
mhm,
ask questions,
mhm,
and that's all good. It helps the individual. But what I'm really excited about today is agentic AI,
mhm,
and we're building that here. It's called Duo Workflow.
mhm,
And the things that we're able to do, because I always wanted to be more efficient
mhm,
at doing my job, and then as a leader I wanted to make my teams more efficient,
mhm,
um, because I thought it freed up their time, right,
mhm,
to on those long term, right? Like, I was
mhm,
always aiming for at least 50% of the time thinking about the future, really building for the future. And I think agentic AI actually enables that kind of ratio work, right? Because in order to get rid of these interrupts or things that just pop up, you can have the agents watching for those things and taking care
mhm,
of those things. So you're not surprised. I'm
mhm,
so excited about, a team here. We were going to do an accessibility fix it. And I
mhm,
think, anyone who's had, a user facing application, especially
mhm,
something that goes into like schools or certain industries, you need to make sure that your code is very accessible and meets all of the different compliance requirements.
mhm,
But over time, I mean, almost every product I've ever worked on has had to have some kind of accessibility fix it because people
mhm,
forgot, or,
mhm,
it wasn't included explicitly in a spec.
mhm, mhm,
And so you go through your backlog, you identify all these
mhm,
problems. And, I challenged the workflow team, like, could we use workflow to do the accessibility? And they did. And I was just
mhm,
like, this is a game changer, right? That the AI can go and identify problems and, give you suggestions to fix it. Because
mhm,
what that means is you could put this agent on all front end changes and have
mhm,
it find these things proactively. So you're not
mhm,
saving them in a backlog for a fix it where everybody surges to try and fix it. And so I see agents doing these kind of things that pop up and annoy us, or agents watching for security alerts, that come in and
mhm,
then give you like, hey, here's all the things that we need to fix. Or, and by the
mhm,
way, here's all the suggested fixes that you just
Mhm.
need to code review test or whatever. And it can test them.
Mhm.
It can do all these things for you. And
Mhm.
um, before you push it out to production. Because Grace, I mean, think about things like Log4j, right?
Mhm.
And how many people had to like stop everything and go figure out how to address this,
Mhm.
large, broadly impacting security alert. And, we've shown that we can actually do that in our platform. Um,
Mhm.
and that's just really, really exciting to me, right?
For
Because
sure.
I think when you free up, engineers' times, it really gives them to space to think about what those next breakthroughs are going to be. So
Mhm.
I don't believe all the hype that the software engineer is going to go away, right? I think we're going to free up their time to do things that we don't actually know we need yet.
Totally. I wonder, okay, so thinking about in the future of like a developer, what do you think they would what if like the new version of coding will look like? So now it's like everybody write their own code and then check the code and then ship the code and then monitor everything. And I wonder in the future, like, do you imagine like the Copilot just write its own code, or like I guess like, or for let's say GitLab Duo, like do you guys like um envision this thing as like a I guess like you helping you to check the code, or would you say it's like, oh, everything will be auto generated in the future?
I don't know that everything will be auto generated.
Mhm.
You know what I think for sure in the next 5 years? I think
Mhm.
people will be able to prototype things
Mhm.
very quickly,
Mm.
right? I think that, things that take a long time to design,
Mhm.
right? Like I was talking to someone last night actually, and they were
Mhm.
like, I don't know what the product manager or UX person's going to do because
Mhm.
right now they spend a lot of time in Figma, but now you can tell the
Mhm.
AI like, hey, I want this, put a button here, and it
Mhm.
just builds it all, right? So like
Mhm.
imagine if you just get to talk to things, see what you want, and then
Mhm.
say yes. Like it's just going to speed up the
Mhm.
time to innovate. And while I think that AI can generate code for you and build things that you want, I think that anyone who's worked at scale,
Mhm.
right, knows that like it's not just,
Mhm.
code completion, right? Like there's
Mhm.
so many big architecture decisions that have to be made,
Mhm.
like what does the storage look like and what's
Mhm.
the APIs for that storage look like in order
Mhm.
to, you're not most people are not just doing thousands of
Mhm.
users, right? Like you got to
Mhm.
be able to hit millions and billions because that's how many people are online. And you
Mhm.
have to be able to handle like for every user, they
Mhm.
have a phone and a laptop and
Mhm.
a tablet, their TV, their
Mhm.
like their hub, whatever they have, their watch. Like there's a ton of different connections and you have to be able to orchestrate all of that stuff. So
Mhm.
it's very difficult for me to imagine that all of those kind of decisions can be made by AI. And the reason is, Grace, like I've worked on a lot of different products,
Mhm.
and how you do this is different, right? It's
Mhm.
different on how the user interacts with it. It's different with like where in the world they are and in order
Mhm.
to deliver service that's available
Mhm.
and also maintainable and sustainable
Mhm.
and resilient. And so, like, it's oversimplification to think that all of the applications and opportunities in the world just require you to write code because
Mhm.
that is not what's involved with delivering software today.
For sure. I wonder, so like one of the audience asked a great question. So Crispin asked, curious what a team of dev look like when you have uh 2,000 under management, and then is a team of teams or each composed of like 8 to 10 people, or like something else entirely. I think like another question I have, like piggyback on this, is like, would you say in the future of like in your future engineering team, instead of like 2,000 people, would you say it's like maybe half AI tools and then half like human, or like there's always like rumors saying that like the more junior stage of engineer are going to be replaced by coding tools, but like I guess like what does it look like for you nowadays? Like I guess like maybe from his question, is there like a lot of micro teams versus, big teams, or like in the future, how does like an engineering team is gonna kind of made up?
I think when you have let's start with the first one. So when you have 2,000 people, look, that's not going to be a flat organization, right?
Mhm,
It can't be. And you don't have, in my case, I didn't have 2,000 people working on the same things,
mhm,
right? This is 2,000 people
mhm,
that covered lots of different businesses and lots of different
mhm,
products
mhm,
um, individually. But let's say just 2,000 people, they're definitely usually in teams. You have management in there.
mhm,
Depending on how cross-functional it is, you
mhm,
probably have program managers in there. So you
mhm,
have your ICs, they're all different levels. You have your
mhm,
tech leads, you have your managers, you have your program managers. There can be some strategy people, like once you get over 1,000 people, it's super helpful, especially as a leader, to kind of have a team around you, because, you're not just managing work. You
mhm,
have your people partners, right? That's like the HR people who are
mhm,
helping they need to help with like the learning and development
mhm,
and the performance management. And so
mhm,
you kind of have a little bit of overhead. I
mhm,
try to keep my overhead like about 10%. To me,
mhm,
that's the sweet spot.
mhm,
Especially if the managers are technical, which I
mhm,
want them to be. So sometimes if you have a single product area, you don't want to just have like, oh, every team is 6 people, right? Because
mhm,
that doesn't allow a lot of growth, and that's a lot of cross team coordination, which is really hard, Grace.
mhm,
So, but you don't want to have everybody try to do everything. That
mhm,
breaks down too. And so that's how you figure out like how do you break up 1,000 people into teams.
mhm,
It's not a size game. It's not strictly numbers, right? It's about
mhm,
what problems are you solving? How can they work with autonomy? Where are the
mhm,
dependencies? And that helps you lay out like where do you need senior managers? Because if you have teams that have dependencies on each other, it's super helpful to have a single leader that can
mhm,
coordinate and negotiate, right? When there's conflicts, and there's always conflicts when you have people involved. Now, going to the future of AI,
mhm,
I do think that you'll have these agents that will be working. We have seen that we can train the agents in the same
mhm,
way that we onboard individuals. But I think that people should not think AI is equivalent to a developer, right?
mhm,
Because the AIs can do much more. And
mhm,
so I would say if you have 2,000 people and you're really leveraging AI, what that means is that's probably maybe 5 years ago, it could have
mhm,
been maybe 4,000 people, but you
mhm,
probably never would have done 4,000 people.
mhm,
So your 2,000 people will probably do a lot more in the
mhm,
future than the 2,000 people from 5 years ago, right?
mhm,
But think about this. Here's how it works, Grace. So let's
mhm,
say I want to do something new. I
mhm,
will go to my team and say, hey, let's do this new
mhm,
thing. 100% of the time, maybe it's 90, but it's
mhm,
very high.
mhm,
They will
mhm,
say, I need headcount, right?
mhm,
I need
mhm,
new people. And so that's how orgs grow, right? It's
mhm,
because the amount of work grows.
mhm,
And so I think in the future with AI, the teams
mhm,
will grow slower, but they're still going to grow because we're
mhm,
going to be creating more. And when you're creating more, like there's complexities with that of how do
mhm,
you deliver that. and
mm,
and even I think you should even go more broader in engineering, because the ecosystem around a software engineer, I think that's important to think about. So like I said, you have these orgs and you have ICs and you have program managers, and when you're delivering products, you have product managers, right?
mhm,
And then you have go to market people, and then you have
mhm,
sales, you have the field team and
mhm,
customer support. And all of these things are, could technically be done by one great person,
mhm,
but you break it up because it's too much of a cognitive load and things you need to know for it to be one person. So I think what happens is the entire ecosystem is affected when you bring AI in, right?
Mm,
Like product managers can do their jobs quicker because the AI can shortcut it for them, right? And the
mm,
same with program managers. Like you might need less program managers because the AI is going to coordinate a bunch of stuff for you. Um,
mm,
but in reality, that 2,000 person can just deliver more with the help of AI, and because they're just going to be more efficient, and you're going to have more headspace to really think about like what is the next thing that would change the world, right? Or
mhm,
whatever your mission is, right? And companies have lots and lots of different missions. You know, some
mm,
are working on climate, and it kind
mhm,
of opens so many avenues. Like I felt people ask me all the time why I stayed at Google for as long as I did, and I
mhm,
did it because Google was investing in lots of different things.
mhm,
So I wasn't just ever on Gmail. I got to
mhm,
work with the YouTube team, and I
mhm,
got to work in ads, and I got to work in search.
mhm,
And Google invested in like what is sustainability, right? And
mhm,
how could we be more responsible stewards to the environment? And I was super motivated by that. And so all of these big problems came up. And I think, you know, you could say that was special about Google, but I think in the future, all companies are going to have the bandwidth to just actually be able to do this.
mhm,
And it will be good for their business,
mhm.
right? And it will be good for their people.
Mm, for sure. I wonder what is it meant to run the core infrastructure at Google. So like I know everything is built on top of infrastructure, but like I guess like um yeah, like I'm just out of curiosity, I'm like what does it kind of like entail to like build the entire infrastructure? And then since Google has been there for a long time, as you mentioned, like well, you joined 19 years ago, or I guess you worked there for 19 years. So like that's a long time. And then I wonder, I'm sure the infrastructure kind of shift towards like from the beginning, there was like five coder to now it's like, 100K holder. I don't know. So how do you think about like I guess like how does the infrastructure even change? And then how do you manage the core infra? Like what does that entail too?
Yeah. So I didn't run all of it.
Yeah,
Just to be
sorry.
clear.
I'm like
I love
like
Grace
yeah.
that you think that I could. Um, but you know, when you're running infrastructure,
Mhm,
as so just to explain a little bit about what core infrastructure is at Google, it's the very product oriented infrastructure. Like Google has underlying infrastructure like the networking and the storage, but the core infrastructure would be, you know, the authentication systems, the abuse systems, analytics, you know, really data oriented
mhm,
oriented systems. And so infrastructure for me
mhm,
is you're solving lots of teams problems at the same time, right?
mhm,
That a lot of the things that are in the core infrastructure at Google were things that were previously very specific to a product area. Um,
mhm,
you know, like data analytics started with in ads, right? Because we
mhm,
needed to do that. But they created something so powerful that rather than everybody have their own analytic systems, we should share that, right?
mhm,
And how you do logging, like having a lot of people log data in different things, that's a risk to your company. And Google understood that very early on and understood the power of where the data and the logs were. So that became something centralized, and
mhm,
then all the tooling could be built on that, and then all of the value of that data could be
mhm,
available to other people, and you could control that data access, you know, centrally, to make
mhm,
sure that user data or the different kinds of data were not put at risk, right? um,
mhm,
Even with a very open culture like Google has. And so I think when you're running infrastructure, you have to
mhm,
be a very good problem solver, right?
mhm,
You have to be able to understand the requirements of different users and
mhm,
find the commonality and the opportunity. And then you also have to be influential, right?
mhm,
Because developers are incredibly opinionated and passionate about their beliefs, and they want it the way that they want it. And I think when you run infrastructure, some people can get away with just mandating, like, no, there's only one way to do it. But the most powerful infrastructure really, which Google has a lot of it, really understands how to navigate all the different requirements, find the commonality, and then raise the bar for what is possible. And so I think the people who are really good at infrastructure are big picture thinkers, and actually are very analytical, so they can really understand how to navigate and see the commonalities between all the different inputs that they will have.
Let's say since I read somewhere that GitLab reported total revenue increased like 31% since last year, and then or like year over year. And then I wonder, when it comes to like increasing revenue, like as a CTO, how do you think about building, like from like adding a different product or like different revenue line? Like how do you think about like what are we gonna build? And then since like AI is like dominating right now, and then how do you think about we just talk about like using AI to like improve code, but I guess like how do you think about building the AI product that actually will be mattering to the developer community?
I think that it's so important. Like you can come up with some really great ideas in the abstract, Grace, but I think in my experience, it's really thinking about the user, and like what their experience is. The good thing for us is we are the user, right? Like I said, we're software engineers too, but that's not enough, right? And so I think in order to think about the value and making revenue on it, you have to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the customer. I think it's very special at GitLab that we're able to meet the customer where they are, and we're also are very invested. We do something called co-create, right? And that's one, we're open core. So if we had a gap and you wanted to contribute, you could. But sometimes what we do is like we actually see the benefit that of a unique need for one customer. And so we spend time really understanding that, and then we'll co-create things together. So we did a partnership with Amazon, and we genuinely came together and thought this would be good for both of our customers, and and built an integration with Duo and Q, right? Because we saw the value of the customers to be able to use both of our company's technology. And so when you can sell something, but in order to see the growth and the stickiness with that customer, you need to be very invested in like what is their return, not just what is yours. And as a CTO, that's the most important thing for me, right? It's a real balance, and it can be a really good idea, but I'm not motivated tech for tech's sake. Like that's not who I am. But there are those people out there, and it's amazing. I actually try to balance both, right? Like what can we sell, but also like what if they're going to buy it, what's the return for them, right? And I have to be like, does this make them more efficient, right? Or does this make their resource costs go down? What is it a value to them, so we can make sure, one, that we price it correctly. And then the other side of growth that the CTO influences is actually the cost, the operating cost for delivering your services and your software. And so I work closely with my operations team and genuinely all of my leadership to make sure they understand what is the cost of their decisions. And I had to do less of that at Google because AdWords is just an amazing money machine. But when you're in a smaller company, you genuinely need to understand what decisions you're making and what are the costs that you're bringing your you're bringing to your own company, right? And
Mhm.
then everything that I invest in, I
Mhm.
want to deliver value to our customers, and
Mhm.
in return, we would get revenue from that. And so
Mhm.
that's sort of how I think about that.
For sure. I wonder, so like, how do you think about the current, I guess, like, AI startup landscape? Or like, what are some products that you're excited about using at GitLab as a CTO? And then what are you excited about, like, just building in-house? Because there's a lot of like different AI solutions and, people are building, and then just curious on like, what to build and what to buy.
Um, God, that's such an open-ended question because there's so much out
Or
there.
maybe we can start with like as a CTO, your tech stack. Like, what does your tech stack kind of look like to build stuff? And then like, or like, what does GitHub,
Well, we use GitLab.
GitLab, GitLab? Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
we use our own tech stack. Um, so, I mean, I interact with it. I think for Duo, the things that I do the most,
Mhm,
because there's so much going on,
mhm,
I am so thankful that, like, we have our issues, and our issues give the whole history of like
mhm,
what's going on. And then there's all these
mhm,
opinions in there. And
mhm,
then there's decisions, and it's all kind of embedded in different
mhm,
spaces. And I just go to Duo Chat and say, summarize issue for me.
mhm,
And then it gives me like all of the summary of the discussions. That is so helpful, right? Because I have to
mhm,
make decisions very, very quickly. Now, the summarization, you do normally have to look at the details to make sure
mhm,
you understand what the summary is. I
mhm,
would say I love, outside of GitLab, I would say
mhm,
I actually love Zoom's summarizing of
mhm,
notes. And just so you know, like at GitLab, when I joined, like everyone's writing notes, right? Every meeting, we pretty
mhm,
much would transcribe the meeting because we
mhm,
work asynchronously. So if people couldn't make, a meeting, they actually could read the notes and see everything that was discussed in detail,
mhm,
right? And I think today, products like Zoom, they not only transcribe the meeting for you, which
mhm,
allows the people who are in the meeting to participate much more because we weren't all taking notes with,
mhm, mhm,
anymore. But I love that it summarizes that. And I would
mhm,
say that that's been a delightful uh, outside of GitLab AI feature that I was like, I love this, right? It
mhm,
saves my time, and it allows our meetings to be much more engaging. Everyone is much more engaged.
mhm. What are something that like, for example, let's say you're building a new product or feature, like I guess like what kind of customer input would you, I mean, how do you value the customer input? Let's say if you chat with a customer and then they ask you to build a certain product or feature, like how do you kind of like take feedback from that perspective?
I think it's um, that that that's kind of a complex question,
Mhm,
but I think the most important thing is to understand that people will tell you what they want.
mhm,
Right. And I think when you're on the receiving end of that, if you take
mhm,
it literally, sometimes
mhm,
you don't solve the problem that they're actually having. Right.
mhm,
And so you hear what they say, but you need to spend time understanding why they think they need what they need. And that's because it makes sure that you implement it the right way. It's
mhm,
super easy to miss details, and then you think you deliver what they want, but you missed an
mhm,
important detail and you delivered something that they absolutely didn't want. And
mhm,
so when you're getting requirements, it's super important to understand how they got to the conclusion for what they're asking for.
mhm,
One, because it makes sure that you meet all of their requirements, even the unspoken ones.
mhm,
And then the second reason to do that is sometimes you can see how to make it better,
mhm,
right? Because they're focused on one problem, and because you have a different perspective, you can actually see a bigger opportunity if you
mhm,
really try and understand, the details or the background for why they're doing what they're doing, or
mhm,
asking why they're asking what they are.
mm. one of the audience said, like, how do you stay focused or reprioritize on the product in GitLab, especially in the face of competition and slash like reprioritizing the product roadmap?
Um, well, I have a great CPO that I get to work with.
Mhm,
And look, I think especially in AI, and I think especially in
mhm,
the last year, and I don't think it's unique to GitLab, I think the
mhm,
technology kind of changed underneath you. I
mhm,
would say normally in my history, you'd have this new technology and you would start building for it, but it was kind of sticky, right?
mhm,
So really building something brand new from finish to end, kind of at scale for sure, takes about 2 years,
mhm,
right? The interesting thing about AI is nobody has 2 years,
mhm,
right? Like in a year, it has come,
mhm,
like what would have normally been 2 or 3 years,
mhm,
maybe even more. I would say
mhm,
the last year, I'm shocked at how good the models are.
mhm,
So much better than they were a year ago. So it's progressing very, very quickly. So I do think in today's age, you need to be able to pivot very, very quickly. And I think going back to making sure you understand the problem that you're solving.
mhm,
And then the second thing is like, what's the quality bar and how is that changing? Because I
mhm,
think that probably was less of an issue in the past or with previous technologies than it
mhm,
is with AI. Because you could say, oh, here's the quality bar. But because the technology progresses so quickly, people people change faster than technology does in some ways, because if you see something better, we want
mhm,
better, right?
mhm,
Everybody wants better. And so you can set a quality bar for January, and by June everyone's expectations are higher. And so I think in today's age, like, you constantly have to know, like, what were the signals that you set that quality bar
mhm,
against, and make sure you're challenging them. I used to do this a lot. I used to force my teams to really reassess the assumptions that they had worked from originally,
mhm,
because assumptions change. Now, I used to do it on, like, every few years, but now it's almost, on I would say monthly, but probably we're going to get to the daily, where you're constantly going to have to think about what are the assumptions that you're working from or
mhm,
were working from last week, and do they still hold true? Because the expectations are changing so quickly because
mhm,
the technology is changing so quickly.
mm. I wonder, so okay, so I just want to be mindful of the time. I didn't realize we're about to hit the time. Okay, so I have a 1 minute fire round for you. Uh what's your favorite book
My favorite book ever?
ever?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
What? Uh,
uh, um,
or what is your content that look like?
I used to like um I used to like a lot of Stephen King. I read a lot of Stephen King. Oh,
Mm.
maybe, you know what? I think it's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I probably reference that book more than anything else. I would
Oh,
say
wow.
any single book, I
Mhm.
probably reference that all the time.
Who
Fish, right? Like, I love the whole series. Actually, I've read them all, and I
yeah,
I think about them all the time. So yeah, I guess that would have to be my favorite of all time.
love that. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
I would like Barack and Michelle Obama. I I just love the way they think and look at problems, and really kind of make it so easy and accessible. Like, they can have really well thought out opinions on very, very complex issues, and they're brilliant and impressive. And yeah, I would love to have a dinner party with them. I'd be so
Uh,
intimidated though, Grace. I'd be so intimidated.
who made the biggest impact in your career?
Um, Gosh, there's so many people who have, given me great advice, given me amazing opportunities. So many people on my team that I'm thankful for. So I think it's hard. I would say though, like, somebody I think about a lot is Megan Smith. I had the fortune to work with her
Mhm.
at Google, and then later on, when she was the CTO of the United States, I saw her at a
CTO.
Grace Hopper conference,
Mhm,
and she was standing there, and she had this long line of young, you know, early career engineers
mhm,
waiting to meet her. And she literally, I watched her for probably 25 minutes, and she was just so present for
mhm,
every single person that she met that I was so
mhm,
impressed with that. And like, I regularly think, like, am I being present with the person that I'm with? And it's very hard because, I'm always thinking about
mhm,
a lot of things, but I do think that that makes you a great leader. And so I remember that day a lot.
mhm,
But it's hard. I mean, I got to work with Ors and Ben Trainer and so many people on my team that have inspired me and made me better.
mhm,
Both peers and people
mhm,
on my team. So I feel bad about naming
mhm,
anybody
mhm.
actually.
What where can we find you outside work?
Outside of work, the Lego store. I spend a lot of
Oh,
time at
what
the Lego store.
Glenn, what is going on in the background? They're like the whole Lego collection
Oh,
of
they are
every
all the way
wonderful.
around me. I'm in my entire house. I have Legos in every single room just because I can't. I hate to take them apart. I love them so much.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's
How long
fun.
does it take you to build something in the background?
Um, I don't know. It's almost a DOS attack, really, because once I open the box, I want to finish it. So I'll stay up all night and just to finish a
They're
build.
all finished daily in the background, just every day. The night routine.
It does change. It changes a lot because I'll have something new and I'll want to show it. But
Yeah,
yeah.
what's your current, build up? Like, I mean, is there, like, something that you're building right now from the
Um,
Lego
I
perspective?
do have the new T-Rex. I haven't opened it because it's a really big set, and
Mhm.
as soon as I open it, so I can't open it until the weekend.
Oh my
I
god. I love that. That's amazing. Actually, I feel like that's kind of like building code as well, but in real life. You have to ensemble it and you have to, like, engineer the structure of it and then making sure you follow the step by step and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kids are easy. They come with a book. It's when I get something in my head that I want to build on my own, um, that'll take me a little bit longer.
Wow, I love that. Like, this is, like, the most, like, advanced Lego collection I've ever seen in my life, but I understand the concept of, like, yeah, anyway, okay, love that addiction of, um, GitLab Lego. But anyway, okay, so thank you so much, Sabrina, for joining us today, and then it was, like, such an awesome conversation, and then just, like, looking at you, seeing, like, the female leader in tech, it's, like, super impressive, and I just, like, really love your energy.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of us. People think that there's not, but there's a lot of us out there. So
Amazing. Okay. So let me quickly end stream.